Maya Hutchinson had always believed in coincidences. She believed that people crossed paths for reasons beyond explanation, that the universe sometimes orchestrated meetings too perfect to be random. On March 9, 2019, that belief would lead her into the most devastating truth of her life. At 21 years old, Maya was everything her mother had raised her to be: ambitious, independent, driven. She'd just completed her junior year at Rice University in Houston, majoring in psychology with plans to pursue clinical work. Her academic record was impressive, her future bright. Yet beneath the accomplishments lived a quiet emptiness she'd never been able to name. Growing up without a father had carved a hollow space inside her, one she filled with achievements and goals, but never quite satisfaction. Her mother, Rebecca Hutchinson, had raised her alone in San Antonio. Rebecca worked as a medical billing specialist, a stable but unglamorous job that kept them financially secure. She was a reserved woman, not cold exactly, but emotionally distant in ways Maya had learned to accept. Hugs were rare. Heart-to-heart conversations rarer still. When Maya asked about her father as a child, Rebecca's answer never varied. He was someone she'd known briefly in her 20s, a mistake she'd made, and he left before Maya was born. Better this way, she'd say. Better not to wonder. Maya had learned to stop asking. Millions of children grew up in single-parent homes. There was nothing unusual about her situation, she told herself. Yet the questions never fully disappeared. They lingered in the margins of her identity, shaping her in ways she wouldn't understand until much later. The coffee shop where Maya's life would fracture was called Beacon Grounds, a popular spot near the Rice campus. She'd been working on a research paper about attachment theory, appropriately enough, when her phone buzzed. A text from her roommate about weekend plans. Maya reached for the phone without looking up from her laptop. Her elbow connected with a ceramic mug on the adjacent table. Hot coffee splashed across a leather messenger bag. The man sitting there looked up, startled but not angry. Maya's face flushed with mortification. She grabbed napkins from the dispenser, apologizing profusely. The stranger waved off her concern with a gentle smile that reached his eyes. Those eyes were striking, warm brown with flecks of gold, carrying a depth that suggested he'd seen more of life than most. His name was Ethan Cross, 38 years old, an architect working for a sustainable design firm in downtown Houston. He had the kind of presence that made people feel immediately at ease. A quiet confidence that didn't demand attention, but commanded it naturally. When Maya insisted on buying him a replacement coffee, he accepted with grace rather than irritation. They began talking. What started as an apology transformed into a conversation that stretched across 3 hours. Ethan asked about her studies with genuine interest, not the patronizing curiosity some older people showed toward college students. Maya found herself opening up about her research, her career aspirations, her fascination with how childhood experiences shaped adult relationships. Ethan listened with an intensity that made her feel truly heard for perhaps the first time in her life. When the conversation turned to him, Ethan spoke carefully about his work. His love of design that balanced aesthetics with environmental responsibility. He mentioned growing up in Corpus Christi, losing his mother young, having a complicated relationship with his father. There was pain in those admissions, old wounds he'd learned to carry with dignity. Maya recognized something in that pain, a kinship of people who'd survived difficult childhoods and emerged, determined to build better lives. The age difference was obvious. 17 years separated them, yet neither seemed bothered by it. Maya had always felt older than her peers, more serious, less interested in the casual dating culture of college. Ethan treated her as an intellectual equal, never once making her feel young or naive. When they exchanged numbers before parting, both felt the spark of something significant beginning. Their first official date happened 4 days later at a Vietnamese restaurant in Midtown. Ethan brought flowers, an old-fashioned gesture Maya found charming rather than corny. Over spring rolls and pho, they discovered shared passions. Documentary films about social justice, hiking trails outside the city, the specific loneliness of growing up without complete families. Ethan shared that he'd lost his mother to a brain aneurysm when he was 9. Maya revealed she'd never known her father at all. Neither spoke about Rebecca. Ethan's memories of Corpus Christi were deliberately vague, focused on his mother in childhood rather than his teenage years. Maya had no reason to ask detailed questions about her mother's past. Their connection felt fresh, unburdened by history. By May 2019, they were inseparable. Ethan attended Maya's end-of-semester presentation on trauma-informed therapy approaches. Maya went to the gallery opening for one of Ethan's sustainable housing projects. Her friends, initially skeptical about the age gap, came around after meeting him. He wasn't predatory or controlling. He celebrated Maya's independence, encouraged her ambitions, respected her boundaries. His colleagues noticed he seemed lighter, more present, laughing more readily than they'd seen in years. The relationship progressed with an ease that surprised them both. They communicated openly about expectations, fears, boundaries. Ethan was patient when Maya had late study sessions. Maya was understanding when Ethan needed quiet evenings after stressful workdays. They explored Houston like tourists, discovering hidden gems, Saturday mornings at the farmer's market, Sunday afternoons at the Museum of Fine Arts, weeknight dinners at family-owned restaurants Ethan had discovered during his years living alone. Maya's roommate, Carmen, pulled her aside in early June. "I was worried at first," Carmen admitted. "A girl, he's genuinely good for you. He listens when you talk. That's rare." Other friends echoed similar sentiments. One told Maya, privately, "He looks at you like you're the most important person in the world. Don't let him go." Ethan introduced Maya to his work friends at a company barbecue in July. His project manager, a woman named Diana who'd known Ethan for a decade, cornered Maya by the dessert table. "I've never seen him like this," Diana said warmly. "He talks about you constantly in the best way. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." These validations mattered to Maya. She'd worried people would judge them, assume Ethan had ulterior motives, question why a 38-year-old man wanted to date a college student. But everyone who met them together saw what she felt. This was real. This was right. As summer deepened into August, their conversations turned to the future. Ethan's lease was ending in November. Maya's roommate was graduating and moving back to Dallas. They discussed getting a place together. Nothing rushed, but practical given how much time they already spent together. They'd talked about adopting a dog after Maya graduated, maybe a rescue from the local shelter. Everything felt possible. On September 7th, Maya's 21st birthday, Ethan proposed at Eleanor Tinsley Park overlooking Buffalo Bayou. The Houston skyline glowed orange and pink behind them as he took her hands and told her she'd changed his life. He didn't finish the proposal before Maya was crying, saying yes. They celebrated with champagne and late-night tacos, making plans for a small spring wedding surrounded by people they loved. Maya had only one request. "I need to introduce you to my mom first. I know she's not the warmest person, but her blessing matters to me." Ethan agreed without hesitation. "Of course. Whenever you're ready." Maya called Rebecca the next morning to share the engagement news. Her mother's response was measured, careful. "You're engaged to who?" When Maya said Ethan's full name and mentioned he'd grown up in Corpus Christi, there was a pause on the other end, longer than normal, heavy with something Maya couldn't identify. "Where exactly in Corpus Christi?" Rebecca asked. "North Side, I think." "Why?" Another pause. "I'd like to meet him before you make any wedding plans," Maya agreed, excited to finally bridge the gap between the two most important people in her life. She had no way of knowing that the meeting would destroy everything she believed about herself, her mother, and the man she loved. Rebecca Hutchinson hadn't spoken the name Corpus Christi aloud in 23 years. Hearing it from her daughter's mouth sent ice through her veins. After Maya hung up the phone, Rebecca sat motionless in her San Antonio living room for nearly an hour. The television played to an empty room. Her mind raced backward through time, calculating possibilities, probabilities. The likelihood that this was mere coincidence. Ethan Cross, 38 years old, from Corpus Christi. It couldn't be him. Corpus Christi was a city of over 300,000 people. Cross was a common surname. It was impossible, but the age matched perfectly. The timeline matched. Rebecca stood and walked to her bedroom closet, pulling down a cardboard box from the top shelf. She hadn't opened it in over a decade. Inside were fragments of her old life, her nursing credential under the name Rebecca Porter, her employee badge from Corpus Christi Memorial Hospital dated 1996 to 1998, a newspaper clipping about the hospital's charity fundraiser. Her hands trembled as she unfolded a staff roster from the pediatric ward. She ran her finger down the list of frequent patients from that winter. Cross Ethan, age 15. Admitted February 1998 following motorcycle accident. Compound fracture, internal injuries, 6-week recovery. Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. She told herself it was paranoia. Even if it was the same Ethan Cross, he wouldn't recognize her after 2 decades. People changed. She'd changed her last name from Porter to Hutchinson in 1999, moved multiple times, built a completely different life. There was no reason for him to connect Rebecca Hutchinson with Rebecca Porter, the young nurse who'd cared for him during the worst period of his adolescence. But what if he did? What if he told Maya? Rebecca considered calling her daughter back and forbidding the meeting, but that would only raise questions. Maya was stubborn, intelligent, too perceptive to accept vague warnings. If Rebecca tried to stop the relationship without explanation, Maya would dig deeper. No, the only option was to meet him, confirm whether it was the same person, and if it was. Rebecca couldn't finish the thought. Over the next month, Rebecca tried to prepare herself. She rehearsed responses to potential questions. She practiced looking calm, neutral, unsuspicious. She told herself that even if it was him, Ethan likely wanted to forget that chapter as much as she did. He wouldn't risk his relationship with Maya by exposing something from so long ago. But late at night, alone in her house, Rebecca couldn't sleep. The guilt she'd buried for over 2 decades resurfaced with crushing weight. She'd convinced herself she'd escaped consequences, that enough time had passed, that she'd earned a clean slate by being a decent mother to Maya. Now the past was walking toward her front door, holding her daughter's hand. Maya called several times in October trying to coordinate schedules. Rebecca made excuses, work obligations, a persistent cold, car trouble. Each delay made Maya more suspicious. During one call, Maya's voice carried an edge of frustration. "Mom, are you okay? You've been acting strange." "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just busy. I promise we'll find a time." But Rebecca couldn't avoid it forever. On October 18th, Maya sent a firm text. "We're coming to San Antonio this Saturday. Dinner at your place, 7 p.m. No excuses." Rebecca stared at the message for a long time before responding. Okay. She spent the days leading up to Saturday in a state of dread. She cleaned obsessively, cooked food she had no appetite for, changed outfits 6 times. On Saturday afternoon, Rebecca sat by her living room window watching the street. Part of her hoped they'd cancel. Part of her hoped she was wrong about everything. At 6:43 p.m., a silver sedan pulled into her driveway. Rebecca's heart stopped. She stood frozen as 2 figures emerged. Maya, radiant and smiling, and a tall man with dark hair and a familiar way of moving that made Rebecca's stomach drop. They walked up the driveway hand in hand. Rebecca opened the door before they could knock. The moment she saw Ethan Cross's face, 23 years older but unmistakably him, she knew her carefully constructed life was about to collapse. Ethan's smile froze when he saw her. His face drained of color. For several seconds, neither of them moved or spoke. Maya looked between them, confused by the sudden tension. "Mom?" Maya's voice seemed to come from very far away. "This is Ethan." Rebecca's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Ethan took a step forward into the light of the entryway, his eyes locked on Rebecca's face with an expression of dawning horror. "Nurse Porter," he whispered. The name hung in the air between them like an accusation. Rebecca flinched as if she'd been struck. Maya's confusion deepened into alarm. "Nurse Porter? Mom, what's he talking about?" Rebecca forced her voice to work. "I think there's been a mistake. Please, come inside." But Ethan wasn't moving. He stared at Rebecca with an intensity that made Maya's skin crawl. "You worked at Corpus Christi Memorial, Pediatric Ward, 1998. "I don't know what you're talking about," Rebecca said, but her voice shook. "Yes, you do." Ethan's voice was barely steady. "You were my nurse. After the accident, February through March 1998. Maya stepped between them, her heart racing. "Wait, what's happening? How do you two know each other?" Neither answered. Rebecca's eyes pleaded with Ethan silently. Ethan looked like he might be sick. Finally, he turned to Maya, his face ashen. "I need to leave." "What?" "No." "Ethan, wait." But he was already walking back to the car, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. Maya ran after him, grabbing his arm. "Ethan, stop. Talk to me." He reached the car and braced himself against it, breathing hard. Maya pulled at his shoulder, trying to turn him around. "You can't just leave without explaining." "Ask your mother," Ethan said bitterly. "Ask her what she did." He got in the driver's seat. Maya stood helpless on the driveway as he started the engine. "Ethan, please." He pulled out without looking at her. Maya watched the taillights disappear, tears streaming down her face. She turned back to the house where Rebecca stood in the doorway, pale and shaking. Maya stormed up the porch steps. "What did you do?" "Nothing." He He's confused. Don't lie to me, Maya screamed. I just watched my fiancé have a breakdown on your porch. What the hell did you do to him? Rebecca sank into the nearest chair, her face in her hands. Maya stood over her mother, shaking with rage and confusion. I'm not leaving until you tell me everything. October 18th, 2019, 8:15 p.m. Maya Hutchinson sat across from her mother at the kitchen table, both of them silent, both trapped in a moment that would define the rest of their lives. Rebecca had made tea, neither would drink. The mug sat cooling between them while Maya waited for an explanation her mother seemed incapable of giving. Start from the beginning, Maya finally said, her voice hollow. How do you know Ethan? Rebecca stared into her untouched tea. I was his nurse a long time ago. When? Winter of 1998. He was in a motorcycle accident. I cared for him during his recovery. Maya's hands clenched into fists. He made it sound like something else happened, like he was terrified of you. Rebecca flinched. He was a troubled boy. I tried to help him. That's not what it looked like. That looked like he was horrified to see you. Teresa finally looked up, her eyes red. It was complicated, then uncomplicated. What happened between you two? Rebecca stood abruptly and walked to the sink, gripping the edge. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. He was my patient. We got close. Too close. The implication hit Maya like a physical blow. Close how? It was a mistake. A terrible mistake. When I realized what I'd done, I left. I left Corpus Christi. I left nursing. I started over. Maya felt nauseous. How close, Mom? Maya, don't. How close? Rebecca turned around, tears streaming down her face. We were involved briefly. It shouldn't have happened. Involved. Maya repeated slowly, the word feeling foreign. You were his nurse. He was 15. You're talking about abuse. It wasn't like that. Yes, it was. He was a child in your care. You were in a position of power, and you abused him. Rebecca crumpled, sliding down against the cabinets until she was sitting on the floor. I know. I know it was wrong. That's why I left. That's why I never looked back. Maya stood frozen, her mind racing through implications she couldn't fully process yet. Ethan had been abused by her mother. The man she loved had been victimized by the woman who raised her. But there was something else. Something Rebecca wasn't saying. When did you leave Corpus Christi? Maya asked quietly. May 1998. Maya's blood went cold. What month was I born? Rebecca didn't answer. Mom, what month was I born? Maya, please. August 1998, Maya whispered, doing the math herself. You left Corpus Christi in May. I was born in August. You were pregnant. Rebecca sobbed harder. Who's my father? Maya asked, though she already knew, already understood. Don't ask me that. Tell me. You can't marry him, Rebecca said desperately. That's all you need to know. You cannot marry Ethan Cross, because he's my father. The words hung between them like a death sentence. Rebecca didn't deny it. She just buried her face in her hands and wept. Maya backed away slowly, her entire body shaking. No, that's not possible. I'm so sorry. You let me fall in love with him. You watched me get engaged to him. You knew who he was. I didn't know until I saw him at the door. I swear, I didn't know it was the same person. You knew where he was from. I told you he grew up in Corpus Christi. It's a big city. I thought it was coincidence. Maya grabbed her purse and keys from the counter. Where are you going? Rebecca asked desperately. Away from you, Maya. Wait. But Maya was already out the door, running to her car, needing to get as far from this house as possible. She got in and drove, not knowing where she was going, just needing to move. Her phone rang, Ethan's name on the screen. She couldn't answer. Couldn't hear his voice right now. She drove for hours, eventually pulling into a motel parking lot outside Austin. She paid cash for a room, turned off her phone, and lay in the dark. And finally, the tears came. Maya stayed in that motel room for 2 days, barely moving. She ordered food, but couldn't eat. She tried to sleep, but woke gasping from nightmares where she walked down an aisle toward Ethan and realized she was looking in a mirror. On October 20th, Ethan finally reached her. She'd turned her phone back on to charge it, and immediately it rang. She answered before she could stop herself. Maya. His voice cracked with relief. Where are you? Are you safe? I'm safe. I've been losing my mind. Tell me what she said. Tell me everything. Maya closed her eyes. She told me you were her patient, that you were 15, that you were involved. Ethan's breath caught. Did she tell you why I ran? She told me enough. She told me you're my father. The silence on the other end stretched so long Maya thought he'd hung up. Then she heard him crying. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I swear to God I had no idea she was pregnant. I had no idea you existed. But you know now. Is that what she told you? That I'm your father?" "She didn't have to. I did the math myself. February through March 1998. She left in May. I was born in August. The timeline is undeniable. This can't be happening. This isn't real. I wish it wasn't." They stayed on the phone for another hour, mostly in silence, both trying to process a reality that felt impossible to accept. Both realizing that everything they'd built together, the love, the plans, the future, had been destroyed by a secret neither of them could have known. "What do we do?" Maya finally asked. "I don't know," Ethan said, "but I know one thing. Your mother needs to be held accountable for what she did." Maya thought about the woman who raised her, who'd lied to her for 21 years, who'd let her fall in love with her own father without saying a word. "Yes," Maya said quietly. "She does." October 21st, 2019. Ethan Cross sat in his Houston apartment staring at his phone. He'd spent the night researching statutes of limitations for sexual abuse in Texas. What he discovered gave him the first glimmer of purpose he'd felt in days. There was no time limit, no expiration date on justice. At 9 a.m., he called the Corpus Christi Police Department and asked to speak with someone about reporting a historical abuse case. He was transferred 3 times before reaching Detective Maria Santos, a specialist in crimes involving medical professionals. "Mr. Cross," Detective Santos said after Ethan explained why he was calling, "I need you to understand something. What you're describing is a serious criminal matter. If you're ready to make an official report, I'll need you to come in person." 2 hours later, Ethan sat in a small interview room at the Corpus Christi Police Department. Detective Santos sat across from him, a recording device between them, her expression professional but compassionate. "Take your time," she said. "Start from the beginning." Ethan told her everything. The motorcycle accident in February 1998 that left him with a shattered femur and internal injuries. His 6-week hospitalization. Rebecca Porter, the 26-year-old pediatric nurse who'd been assigned to his care. How she'd started asking personal questions about his home life, his mother's recent death, his father's emotional absence. How the boundary between professional care and personal interest had blurred gradually, then completely. "She told me I was mature for my age," Ethan said, his voice barely steady. "That I understood things other teenagers couldn't. She started visiting my room when she wasn't on shift. She'd bring me books, sit with me for hours. I thought she cared about me." "When did the relationship become physical?" Santos asked gently. "Late March. After I was discharged but still coming back for physical therapy appointments. She gave me her personal number, said I could call any time. We started meeting outside the hospital. I was 15. I didn't understand what was happening was wrong. I thought it was love. How long did this continue?" "Through April. Then she suddenly stopped responding to my calls. I found out later she'd resigned from the hospital. No explanation. She just disappeared." Santos made detailed notes. "Did you tell anyone at the time?" "No. I was ashamed, confused. Part of me thought I'd done something wrong, that she left because of me. And you had no knowledge of a pregnancy?" Ethan's voice broke. "None. I didn't know until last week when my fiancée, her daughter, put the pieces together. I've been engaged to my own child, Detective. Rebecca Porter stole my adolescence and then created a situation where I unknowingly fell in love with the daughter she never told me existed." Santos set down her pen. "Mr. Cross, I'm going to be direct. This is one of the most disturbing cases I've encountered in 20 years. If everything you're telling me is accurate, Rebecca Porter committed multiple felonies and has been evading justice for over 2 decades. We're going to investigate thoroughly." The investigation moved swiftly. Santos pulled Rebecca's employment records from Corpus Christi Memorial Hospital. Her personnel file showed she'd been hired in January 1996 and resigned abruptly on May 15, 1998, citing personal reasons. Hospital records confirmed Ethan had been her patient during the exact time frame he'd described. Santos contacted the hospital's former head of pediatrics, now retired. The woman remembered Rebecca vaguely. She was competent, but kept to herself. Her sudden departure was unusual, but we assumed it was a family emergency. She didn't give us much choice, just submitted her resignation and left. Did anyone ever raise concerns about her behavior with patients? There was a pause. Not officially. But I remember another nurse mentioning once that Rebecca seemed overly attached to one of the teenage patients. I didn't pursue it. I should have. Santos also discovered that Rebecca had legally changed her name from Porter to Hutchinson in March 1999, 4 months after giving birth. She'd moved to San Antonio, worked various administrative jobs, never returned to nursing. She'd lived quietly, carefully, hiding in plain sight. On October 25th, Santos presented her findings to the district attorney. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling: Ethan's detailed testimony, the hospital records corroborating timeline and access, Rebecca's sudden departure and subsequent name change, and the existence of a child born exactly 9 months after the alleged abuse. The DA authorized an arrest warrant. Charges included sexual assault of a minor, abuse of professional authority, and fraudulent concealment of paternity. On October 28th, 4 San Antonio police officers arrived at Rebecca's home at 6:45 a.m. Rebecca answered the door fully dressed, her purse already on her shoulder. She looked like she'd been expecting them. "I know why you're here," she said quietly. At the police station, Rebecca waived her right to an attorney. The detective conducting the interrogation was stunned. Most people facing decades in prison immediately lawyered up. But Rebecca seemed almost relieved to finally talk. "Can you tell me about your time at Corpus Christi Memorial Hospital?" the detective began. "I was a pediatric nurse from 1996 to 1998. "Why did you leave?" "Because I got pregnant by a patient. Ethan Cross. He was 15 years old. The detective blinked. She was confessing immediately, completely. "Can you describe the nature of your relationship?" "I initiated it. He was vulnerable, grieving his mother. I manipulated him. When the relationship became physical in March 1998, I knew it was wrong. I knew it was abuse. But I convinced myself otherwise. What happened when you discovered you were pregnant? I panicked. I knew I'd lose my job, face criminal charges, lose everything, so I resigned and disappeared. I moved to San Antonio, changed my name, and had the baby alone. Did you tell Ethan about the pregnancy?" "No." "Why not?" "Because telling him would mean admitting what I'd done. I couldn't face that." The confession continued for 3 hours. Rebecca provided details, answered every question, never tried to minimize her actions. By the time they finished, the detective had a full recorded admission of guilt. Rebecca was formally charged and held without bail. By October 30th, the story had leaked to local media. By November 1st, it was national news that the headline in the San Antonio Express News read, "Former nurse arrested for decades-old abuse after daughter's engagement reveals truth." By afternoon, the story had spread to Houston media. By evening, it was trending nationally. The public reaction was visceral and immediate. Social media exploded with outrage, sympathy, and morbid fascination. The case had everything that drove engagement: abuse of power, a shocking twist, and a situation so disturbing it seemed impossible to be real. Maya and Ethan's identities were technically protected by privacy laws. But within 48 hours, internet investigators had identified them both. Their social media accounts were flooded with messages ranging from supportive to cruel. Someone found and published the engagement photos Maya had posted months earlier. The images showed a couple in love, smiling, planning a future. Comments poured in. "This is the saddest thing I've ever seen. How do you not know you're related? There has to be signs. She should have done DNA tests before getting engaged." Ethan's workplace was besieged by media requests. His firm issued a brief statement. "We support our employee during this difficult time and request that his privacy be respected." Maya's university received similar attention. Her professors declined to comment, citing student confidentiality. True crime forums dissected every detail. Podcasters dedicated episodes to the case. Documentary producers reached out to everyone involved, offering money for interviews. Rebecca declined all requests from jail. Ethan released a statement through an attorney. "I ask that the media respect everyone's privacy as we navigate an unimaginable situation. The focus should be on justice, not sensationalism." Maya remained completely silent. She'd withdrawn from Rice University on November 3rd and moved to Seattle to stay with her college friend, Adriana. For weeks, she barely left the apartment. She attended therapy 4 times a week with a trauma specialist who helped her process what psychologists called identity fragmentation, the complete collapse of her understanding of who she was. "The hardest part," Maya told her therapist during one session, "is that I still love him. I look at pictures of us and I see someone I loved with my whole heart. But now I can't separate that love from the horror of what we are to each other. Meanwhile, the legal machinery ground forward. On November 15th, Rebecca appeared before a grand jury. They returned a true bill within hours, formally indicting her on multiple charges: sexual assault of a minor, abuse of professional authority, fraudulent concealment of paternity, and fleeing jurisdiction to avoid prosecution. Rebecca's court-appointed attorney, a public defender named Thomas Brennan, urged her to fight the charges, or at least negotiate for a lesser sentence. Rebecca refused. "I'm guilty," she told him. "I don't want to drag this out. I don't want Maya and Ethan to suffer through a trial." On December 2nd, Rebecca appeared for arraignment. She entered a guilty plea on all counts. The courtroom was packed with journalists, legal observers, and advocates for abuse survivors. The judge accepted her plea and scheduled sentencing for December 20th. The sentencing hearing was emotionally devastating. Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Morales argued for the maximum penalty. This defendant didn't just commit a crime 23 years ago. She perpetrated an ongoing crime through deliberate concealment. She created a situation where her victim unknowingly became romantically involved with his own daughter. That's psychological torture extending across decades. The most powerful moments came during victim impact statements. Ethan's statement, read by the prosecutor because he couldn't bring himself to attend, declared, "Rebecca Porter stole my childhood, my ability to trust, and 23 years of knowing my daughter. She created a nightmare that will haunt me for the rest of my life." Maya's statement was even more devastating. She stood at the podium, her voice steady but hollow. "I don't know who I am anymore. My entire identity was built on lies my mother told to cover up a crime. Every memory I have is contaminated. She destroyed any possibility of a normal relationship between my father and me. She destroyed the relationship we had without knowing. I will spend the rest of my life trying to rebuild myself from the ruins she created." Rebecca, given the opportunity to speak, stood and faced her daughter. "Maya, I know sorry isn't enough. Nothing I say can undo what I've done. I took everything from you and Ethan. I took your innocence, your identity, your chance at a normal life. I deserve whatever punishment this court gives me. I only hope that someday, somehow, you can find peace." Judge William Morrison sentenced Rebecca to 20 years in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 12 years. "This court recognizes the extraordinary harm you've caused," the judge said. "Not just to one victim, but to multiple victims across multiple generations. Your actions were calculated, your concealment deliberate, and the consequences catastrophic." Outside the courthouse, victim advocates praised the sentence as a rare example of equal justice. Historically, female offenders in similar cases received significantly lighter sentences than male offenders. Rebecca's 20 years sent a message: abuse is abuse, regardless of the perpetrator's gender. For Maya and Ethan, the sentence meant something simpler: acknowledgement. Their truth had been validated. Their pain had been recognized. Justice, imperfect as it was, had been served. But justice didn't heal them. It didn't restore what had been stolen. As they left the courthouse through separate exits, avoiding the media, both understood that the real work was just beginning. The work of surviving, the work of rebuilding, the work of learning to live with a truth that would never stop hurting. January 2020. Maya Hutchinson, though she would soon legally change her name to Maya Cross, sat in a Seattle therapy office staring at a question she couldn't answer. Her therapist, Dr. Lauren Fisher, had asked, "What do you want your relationship with Ethan to look like moving forward?" Maya had no answer. The man was her father, but they'd fallen in love before knowing that truth. How did you rebuild a relationship from such contaminated foundations? How did you separate genuine connection from the horror of what had almost happened? For the first 6 months after Rebecca's sentencing, Maya and Ethan had no contact. Both needed space to process independently. Maya threw herself into therapy and volunteer work at a crisis center for abuse survivors. Helping others gave her purpose when her own life felt meaningless. Ethan joined a support group for male survivors of sexual abuse and began speaking publicly about his experience. In March 2020, Maya sent Ethan a brief email: "I don't hate you. I need you to know that. None of this was your fault." Ethan responded immediately: "Knowing you don't hate me means more than you can imagine. None of it was your fault either." They began exchanging emails, carefully worded messages about their separate healing processes, their therapy breakthroughs, their struggles with identity and trust. The correspondence was formal, cautious, but it represented a bridge neither had been sure could exist. In July 2020, they agreed to meet in person with a family therapist present. The meeting took place in a neutral office in Austin, halfway between Seattle and Houston. When Maya walked in and saw Ethan sitting across the room, her first instinct was to run. But she stayed. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi," Ethan replied, his voice thick with emotion. The therapist, Dr. Rachel Mendez, specialized in helping families reconnect after extreme trauma. She guided them through their first conversation in 9 months. They talked about the pain, the anger, the grief for what should have been. Maya brought a photo album of her childhood. "I thought maybe you'd want to see the years you missed," she said. Ethan went through each page with tears streaming down his face. First day of school, soccer games, science fair projects, birthday parties. All the moments he should have been present for but didn't know existed. "You were beautiful," he said. "You are beautiful." "I have your eyes," Maya observed. "I never knew who I got them from. Now I do." They established boundaries going forward, monthly video calls, quarterly in-person meetings, always with therapeutic support initially. They agreed not to rush defining the relationship. They agreed that Rebecca had taken enough from them, and they wouldn't let her take their future too. By 2021, Maya and Ethan had developed what could only be described as a carefully constructed bond. It wasn't a traditional parent-child relationship. It couldn't be. But it was real, built on mutual respect, shared trauma, and genuine care for each other's well-being. Ethan attended Maya's college graduation in May 2022 when she completed her degree in psychology. Maya attended the launch of Ethan's book in September 2022, a memoir about surviving abuse and finding purpose in advocacy. They celebrated holidays together, sometimes with Ethan's small circle of friends who'd become like family. Maya eventually began dating again. In 2023, she met someone named Jordan, a social worker who understood trauma and didn't run from her complicated history. When Maya introduced Jordan to Ethan, it felt significant, like a milestone of normalcy they'd fought hard to reach. Ethan also moved forward. He became a prominent advocate for male abuse survivors, testifying before legislatures, speaking at conferences, helping change laws. He channeled his pain into purpose. He dated cautiously but remained single, focusing on healing and advocacy work. Rebecca served her sentence at the Mountain View Unit in Gatesville, Texas. She was a model prisoner, working in the prison library, attending every counseling session offered. She wrote letters to Maya that she never sent, understanding that her daughter owed her nothing, especially not forgiveness. In 2024, 5 years after the truth emerged, Maya sat down for an interview with a journalist writing about the long-term impact of institutional abuse. When asked what she'd learned from her experience, Maya's answer was careful and considered. "I learned that trauma doesn't define you, unless you let it. My mother's crime stole my origin story, but it didn't steal my future. Ethan and I have built something meaningful from the wreckage. It's not what either of us would have chosen, but it's ours. We're not victims anymore. We're survivors, and that matters." The case left a lasting legacy. It sparked national conversations about gender bias in prosecuting abuse cases. It led to legislative reforms strengthening protections for all abuse survivors, regardless of gender. Corpus Christi Memorial Hospital implemented comprehensive safeguards to prevent similar situations. The case became a touchstone in psychology programs studying complex trauma and identity reconstruction. But beyond the headlines and policy changes, the real story was simpler and more profound. Two people, connected by biology and trauma, chose connection over isolation. They chose healing over bitterness. They chose to honor their pain by refusing to let it have the final word. Some secrets destroy families, some destroy generations. Rebecca Porter's secret did both, but it also revealed uncomfortable truths about how society enables abuse and fails victims. And in the painful aftermath, it showed that survival is possible, that healing is real, and that even the most shattered identities can be rebuilt. Maya and Ethan didn't get the relationship they deserved, but they got the relationship they built together. One careful boundary, one honest conversation, one act of courage at a time. And perhaps that was enough.